Namaskar and a very warm welcome. You're watching Vantage. I'm Akanksha Swarup. The war has reached Russia's doorstep. Ukraine's counter-offensive is well and truly off. Moscow was struck by drones today. Kyiv is denying responsibility. But Russia says this was a terrorist attack executed by Ukraine. 8 drones flew towards Moscow, with at least 2 crashing into residential buildings away from the battlefield. Russia is banking on alternate blocks to deter Western sanctions to create an alternative to the Western-led financial order, and its eyes are on BRICs. We'll tell you how India is front and center in creating an alternative to the Western-led financial order. Also on the show, we'll tell you how NATO troops came under attack in Kosovo. And it seems Russia has a new weapon to spy on its rivals, a beluga whale. All that and much more coming up ahead. I'm Akanksha Swarup, filling in for Palki Sharma. First up are the headlines. China snubs America. Beijing declines invitation for a meeting between Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin and his Chinese counterpart Li Shangfu. US says since 2021, China has declined over a dozen requests for key defense engagements. Imran Khan sends a multi-million-dollar defamation notice to Pakistan's health minister. This comes after Minister Abdul Qadir Patel claimed the PTI chief is mentally unstable. Last week, the Shehbaz Sharif government shared Imran Khan's medical reports from when he was in custody. Sudan's warring generals agree to extend the ceasefire by 5 days, but violence continues in capital Khartoum. The Sudanese army and paramilitary rapid support forces signed the truce on 20th May. Both parties have frequently violated the ceasefire aimed at providing humanitarian aid. Brazilian president hosts South American Leaders Summit. 11 of the continent's 12 heads of state to attend the summit in Brasilia. Only Peruvian President Dina Boluarte expected to miss it. The summit is the first of its kind in nearly a decade. And watch your weight, says Air New Zealand. The airline will be weighing its passengers departing on international flights from July. Air New Zealand says the exercise is to ensure safe and efficient operation of its aircraft. Flyers on the domestic network were weighed in 2021. Did you see that? That was a drone crash. It happened in Moscow. This morning, 8 drones flew towards the Russian capital. Today, Moscow was targeted. 8 drones flew towards the Russian capital. Several buildings were damaged. At least 2 drones crashed into residential towers. No deaths were reported, but evacuations had to be ordered. This is the biggest attack on Moscow yet. The war has reached Russia's doorstep. Russia says it destroyed all 8 drones, but the damage was visible. There were marks on at least 3 high-rise buildings. Some of the residents heard loud bangs. There was the smell of petrol in the air. Some eyewitnesses shot videos. They saw a plume of smoke above the Moscow skyline.
I live on the second floor of the building across the street, building number 32. In the morning, around 4 a.m., I had a look already. There was a deafening bang, as if a huge bolt of lightning had struck somewhere near. I thought it was caused by an air defense system going off because I live in the area where that can happen. I know how it sounds. I came out to have a look. There were lots of emergency services on site, and you could see that the top of the building was damaged. It turns out it was not the air defenses. That means it was something more serious, something more interesting.
Where was Putin when drones flew into Russia today? Reports say he was outside the city. Russian Defense Ministry says this was a terrorist attack. Who was behind it? Russia is blaming Ukraine. Kyiv is denying any role, but it is sending a clear message to Moscow. Expect more strikes in the coming days. A presidential advisor to Zelensky spoke out today. He said Kyiv had no connection to the aerial assault. But we are watching with pleasure and we predict an increase in the number of attacks. That's what he had to say. Those are the words of a presidential advisor. The fact is, Russian territories are increasingly coming under attack. Just look at the timeline of recent events. This month, there were strikes on Russian oil pipeline installations. Even the Kremlin was targeted. 2 drones blew up above the Kremlin. Do you remember this? Russia said Ukraine tried to assassinate Putin. Kyiv had rejected Moscow's claims. We have heard similar denials about a week ago as well, when towns near the border came under attack. Yes, I'm talking about the Belgorod incursions. About a week ago, it came under attack. It was one of the largest cross-border raids yet. The villages in Belgorod were evacuated. Russia says it killed 70 attackers. It insists the fighters were Ukrainians. Russian officials released pictures. They showed damage to Western military vehicles. Again, Ukraine issued a denial. They said the Russian militia is behind the attacks. 2 groups came forward to take responsibility: the Russian Volunteer Corps and Freedom of Russia Legion. They sent out this message to Moscow.
Our future plans are entering new territories of the Russian Federation, which we will definitely enter. In principle, you should just be a little bit patient and wait just a couple of days to see us again on that side.
That's like a declaration of war. Ukraine likes to maintain a distance from these groups. But going by some claims, they have links to Ukraine's army, and they are helping out the Ukrainian forces to catch the Russian forces off guard and split their military resources. Ahead of that planned counteroffensive, all this helps Ukraine. How will Russia respond? Well, the Kremlin won't take this lying down. They will hit back hard. Already, attacks on Kyiv are intensifying. Russian forces have struck Ukraine's capital 17 times so far. The mass airstrikes continue today. At least 1 person died. Residential buildings were damaged and there was panic. I want to show you some pictures. This could be disturbing for some viewers. We advise viewer discretion. We are entering a new phase in this war, one that could define its outcome. But targeting civilian populations on both sides could have dangerous repercussions. That's the battlefield news, but what's happening diplomatically? Russia has banged on alternate blocs to deter Western sanctions. Chief among them, BRICs. That's a bloc of Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa. What's their goal? To create an alternative to the Western-led financial order. The BRICS countries set up a bank in 2015. It's called the NDB, or the New Development Bank. There are 9 members so far, but reports say a 10th could soon be added. And it's a heavyweight, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Some background first. The BRICS Bank lends mostly to developing economies. They have given out loans worth $32 billion for 90 plus projects. Beyond BRICS nations, it has 3 members, the UAE, Bangladesh and Egypt. But right now, the bank is facing a funding crisis. Russia owns around 19% stake in the bank, plus around 6.7% in total assets. After Western sanctions, BRICS Bank has been forced to freeze Russian exposure. The result? There's a shortage of funds. That's where Saudi Arabia comes into the picture. It is the world's 2nd largest oil producer, which means funds are not a problem. In addition, they also bring clout in West Asia. The BRICS Bank's annual summit is underway. Here's what they told the Financial Times. In the Middle East, we attach great importance to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and are currently engaged in a qualified dialogue with them. So talks are underway. And this is part of Riyadh's broader engagement with BRICS. They want to join the bloc. Saudi Arabia's membership is expected to be taken up during the summit in August this year. If all members agree, BRICS could have a new member. Does mess up the acronym though. Anyway, what does Saudi Arabia bring to the table? Deep pockets, influence in West Asia and a lot of oil. That last one is especially important. BRICS countries have been pushing for a common currency, a BRICS currency, one they could use to trade with each other. If Saudi Arabia agrees to sell oil in BRICS currency, it would be a big boost. Even bigger if they peg oil to the BRICS currency instead of the dollar. But that's all in the future. Right now, let's focus on the BRICS summit. It is scheduled for August and South Africa will be hosting it. Just one problem though. South Africa is a member of the ICC or the International Criminal Court. Last year, the ICC issued a warrant for Vladimir Putin's arrest. What does that mean? It means South Africa is legally bound to arrest Putin if he steps foot in the country. So how will he attend the summit? Well, the government has found a loophole. They have granted diplomatic immunity to all summit attendees, the foreign ministers who will meet this week and the heads of state who meet in August. South Africa says this is routine, that their national law offers immunity to all attendees of global conferences. But still, one question remains. Can South Africa use national laws to override international statutes? That's for legal hawks to decide. Let's focus on the politics. The US and West invested a lot in South Africa. I mean diplomatically, not financially. They saw a stable and strategic partner in South Africa, perhaps a continental leader. But they underestimated South Africa's strategic autonomy. The country has been neutral in the ongoing war and sometimes more than neutral. In February, they held joint drills with Russia and China. Remember, this is in the middle of the Ukraine war. Then earlier this month, South Africa's army chief visited Moscow. That was breaking point for the US. They accused South Africa of selling weapons to Russia. President Cyril Ramaphosa called the accusation disappointing. And now you have this diplomatic immunity. South Africa is going above and beyond to host Putin. What does that tell you? The West's effort to isolate Russia has not succeeded. Russia is still a trusted partner in many countries. This week, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov was in Kenya. He will now fly down to South Africa. It shows the limits of Western sanctions and power plays. And where does that leave India? Caught in the middle, I guess. India's interest in the BRICS is based on the economic potential. The bloc makes up 25% of the global GDP, also 40% of the global population. India can use the BRICS to reshape the global economy, to build bridges to the global south. But here's the problem. India can't let BRICS become explicitly anti-US, at least not politically. That will be the challenge for India in BRICS, much like the challenge in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. We'll be tracking this week's summit very closely. Speaking of China, all's not going well with the Chinese economy. This year, China's economy was supposed to rebound, but the Communist Party's plans are not working. New problems keep coming up. The latest one is unemployment. It has touched record highs. I have some numbers. Joblessness among youth has hit a record, 20.4%. This was in April. That number is 4 times higher than China's national unemployment rate. It was around 5.5% last month. Unemployment in urban China is over 20%. These are alarming numbers. Do you know what they mean? About a fifth of China's urban youth is unemployed. Millions more are expected to graduate this year. They will enter the job market. The future for these workers looks uncertain. Either they'll be forced to take up low-paying jobs or they'll remain unemployed. Already the market for job seekers is crowded. I have more numbers to share with you. There are 96 million young workers in China's urban labor force. Out of this, 6 million are unemployed. Once more students graduate, they'll be entering the same market. So expect these numbers to go up. This is a serious problem for the Communist Party. It hails economic prosperity as one of its greatest achievements. Now that same prosperity is under threat. Reviving the Chinese economy is no easy task. For decades, China enjoyed a period of rapid growth. That era is now over. There are clear structural problems to deal with. The property boom is over. There's now an oversupply of apartments. As of February, about 4 million homes were unsold. Local governments have been crippled by debt. Do you know how much money they owe? At least $9 trillion. Some provinces are showing signs of distress. They are extending repayment deadlines to avoid default. Some are even calling out defaulters openly. The city of Wuhan is naming and shaming them in hopes to recover some money. We had told you about this yesterday. Chinese households are worried about the future, so they are hoarding cash. Earlier this year, a report came out in China. Household savings rate touched new highs. Last year, it was at 33%. So what does that mean? Chinese households are saving a large chunk of their income, not because the bank is giving great interest rates, but because they are afraid. They are worried about the economy. They fear they might need to dip into their savings. So they are saving more. All this is bad news for the Communist Party. There is unemployment, consumption is low, spending is down, and the market sentiment is negative. All this threatens China's internal stability. China is quite paranoid about this. It sees any form of protest or dissent as a direct challenge to its authority. That's why it crushes any protest swiftly. The legitimacy of the Communist Party's rule is reinforced by economic growth and prosperity. So any distress could fuel a resistance. Already, there is evidence of public anger. Look at these pictures. They're from the Yunnan province. The men in black is Chinese law enforcement. They show up in riot gear. But why? Well, the locals were protesting. Chinese authorities wanted to demolish a mosque. They faced stiff resistance. The locals tried to stop the demolition. This led to clashes. Such protests are rare in China, but they are a sign not all's well in Xi Jinping's China. It's a bombshell case in the Indian defense industry. A major aviation giant, kickbacks worth millions, and a decade-long probe. But this week, there was criminal action. India's CBI filed a conspiracy case against Rolls-Royce and British Aerospace Systems. Some anonymous public officials were also named. So what exactly is this case about? And what is the accusation against Rolls-Royce? Let's hit rewind. In 2004, India signed a deal with Rolls-Royce. It was worth around $1.2 billion. The deal had two parts. One, the sale of 24 Hawk advanced jet trainers, and two, licensed manufacturing. India's Hindustan Aeronautics Limited received the technology to produce 42 jet trainers. So you had a full sale and technology transfer. The second deal was signed between 2008 and 2010. This one was worth $1.16 billion. India agreed to buy 57 jets from British Aerospace Systems. Turns out both deals were tainted. Rolls-Royce and BAE paid bribes, commissions and kickbacks to Indian middlemen. They in turn pushed for these deals. What's more, they also increased the license fee. Remember the technology transfer we talked about? It was supposed to be worth £4 million. But India ended up paying $7.5 million. Why? Because the officials involved took bribes. This whole case was revealed by UK media in 2012. That's when British investigators opened an investigation. They found that Rolls-Royce had paid £1 million to Indian middlemen. But that wasn't all. The company was bribing officials in China, Indonesia, Malaysia, and even Thailand. In the end, Rolls-Royce settled the case. They paid $614 million in fine. But now they are facing the heat in India. The CBI had launched an official investigation in 2016. Around 7 years later, a case has been filed. Rolls-Royce has agreed to cooperate with the probe. They say it's a different company today, that there is zero tolerance for business misconduct. British Aerospace Systems has refused to comment. They say since the probe is active, it's inappropriate to comment. So what exactly is the CBI hoping to achieve here? Their case names multiple entities. Rolls-Royce Holdings, its former India head Tim Jones, the British Aerospace Systems, and interestingly, a father-son arms dealer duo, Sudhir and Bhanu Chaudhary. This isn't their first dance with the CBI. In 2006, they were named in the Israeli Barak missile probe. They got a clean chit eventually, but the case forced both men to relocate from Delhi to London. In 2014, they were arrested in the UK. On what charges? Helping Rolls-Royce pay bribes in China and Indonesia. But once again, the case was dropped. Rumour is both father and son were focused on India since 2015. The question is, did they bribe Indian officials for Rolls-Royce? That's for the Indian investigators to identify. But this case reveals a problem that has plagued India's defence acquisition for years: corruption, kickbacks and favours. These can have real-life impact on India's national security. Take these Rolls-Royce jets, for example. The Indian Air Force operates 123 of them. The Navy uses 17. Most of them were made by Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, based on the technology transfer. In hindsight, was Rolls-Royce the right pick? There are no indications to say otherwise, but it's a risk India cannot afford. Now let's shift our focus to the Balkans. Ethnic tensions have been escalating in Kosovo since last Thursday. Tensions between ethnic Serbs and Albanians in the region. They have erupted into clashes between the Serbs and NATO peacekeeping forces. At least 25 members of NATO's Kosovo force, or KFOR, have been injured. The troops who were wounded are mostly from Italy and Hungary. Some of them have sustained serious injuries. The clashes are taking place in the northern parts of Kosovo. Some northern towns are mostly populated by ethnic Serbs. They have refused to accept Kosovo's 2008 declaration of independence. They still consider Serbia's Belgrade their capital. Meanwhile, Serbia's president, Alexander Vučić, is upping the ante. He says that 52 ethnic Serbs were hurt in the recent clashes. Vučić has put the Serbian army on the highest level of combat alert. It has sent alarm bells ringing. The EU and NATO are urging a de-escalation. No one wants a repeat of the ethnic violence of the late 1990s. Here's a report.
These were the scenes outside government offices in northern Kosovo yesterday. In 4 villages in the region, Leposavić, Zubin Potok, Mitrovica and Zvekan. The people clashing with the troops are ethnic Serbs. They form the majority of the population in the 4 communes. They're clashing with the NATO peacekeepers. The force is called KFOR. At least 25 peacekeepers have been injured. The protesting villagers threw stones and other hard objects at them. This was after the troops forcefully tried to clear the Serbs using tear gas and stun grenades. They were trying to make way for Kosovo's special police forces. Serbia has not taken kindly to their actions.
Nemam da kažem.
I don't have any nice words to say about our partners in the European Union, about our partners within Kosovo Force. Their reaction was late. They should have been there on Friday, the way they are there today. Their mandate is to protect peace and stability, and before all, to protect people. Today they are not protecting people, they are not protecting democracy, they are not protecting institutions. But we have to continue to preserve peace.
The latest confrontation started last week. On Thursday, new mayors were sworn in at all 4 Serbian towns. The mayors were all ethnic Albanians. They won because the local Serbs had boycotted the mayoral elections last month. The 4 mayors won with a less than 3.5% voter turnout. They obviously don't represent the local electorate. But Kosovo wants them to take up their posts anyway. They were under orders from Kosovo's capital, Pristina, to physically go to the municipal offices. This is what has led to the escalation in tensions.
We have 2 requests: that illegal, illegitimate sheriffs, the way they call themselves, the newly elected mayors, go to their homes and boss around their relatives, their wives, kids and other relatives, and that all of the special forces that are currently in the town hall and around the town hall pull out towards the south with all the vehicles, because this is not a police station. This is the people's town hall, city hall, that should serve people.
The local Serbs want the new mayors and Kosovo's special police forces out. The standoff is heating up. And it isn't limited to Kosovo. There's been saber rattling from Serbia's President Aleksandar Vučić.
We deployed our forces in accordance with the situation at places where we think it is necessary. We will visit many places with our army. We will not allow the pogrom of the Serbian people. For the last time, I will reiterate my appeal that the international community take action to bring Albin Kurti to his senses, to reason with him without resorting to pointless press releases on one hand while endorsing him with everything on the other.
Vučić has put the blame squarely on Kosovo's Prime Minister, Albin Kurti. This time, the US and EU have rebuked Pristina as well, for insisting that the Albanian mayors go to the town halls in the Serb villages. They want the mayors to work remotely till tensions subside. Kurti tweeted this after talking to the Western nations. He mentioned citizens of all ethnicities. It seems like an olive branch. Because no one can let the violence of the late 1990s return. Kosovo is a majority Albanian region. A separatist movement began in 1998. The Serbian government countered it with a violent crackdown. Over 13,000 people were killed, over 1 million displaced. Kosovo declared independence in 2008. Serbia has not recognized it. Neither have a host of countries like Russia, India and China. However, the US and several European nations have backed Kosovo's independence. As the tensions flare up, the world now needs to put aside these differences. Because the last thing we need is another war erupting.
The Korean conflict is entering space. North Korea is all set to launch a spy satellite. At least that's what they claim. The launch is slated for next month. It could happen between May 31st and June 11. North Korea has notified Japan of the launch. They say it could affect the waters near the Yellow Sea and the East China Sea. Japan has put its missile defense on alert. The plan is to shoot down any projectile that enters Japanese territory. This announcement raises a couple of questions. Why does Pyongyang need a spy satellite? Does it have such technologies? And why is the US and South Korea worried? Kim Jong-un has a long wish list of weapons, like nuclear submarines and intercontinental missiles. A spy satellite was also part of that list. But here's how Pyongyang is justifying it. A spy satellite would help North Korea identify US warplanes and deployments. It would improve the accuracy of any military strike. That's the official explanation. But is North Korea capable of building something like that? They have launched 2 Earth observation satellites before, one in 2012 and again one in 2016. Neither has sent any pictures back to Earth. Is this spy satellite any different? Experts say it's unlikely. North Korea's state media has released a picture of the so-called spy device. Experts say it's too small to relay high-quality pictures. Why then is Pyongyang bothering to launch it? To test the technology. You see, satellite launchers share a lot in common with long-range missiles. The core technology is same. So launching spy satellites could be an excuse. The real reason could be testing out ballistic missile technology, which, by the way, is illegal. The UN Security Council has banned North Korea from using ballistic technology. So if this launch goes ahead, there will be sanctions, or rather, more sanctions. Japan and South Korea have criticized Pyongyang's plan. They're calling it a serious provocation. So why is Kim Jong-un provoking and why now? Just last week, the US and South Korea conducted live fire drills near North Korea. 4 more drills are planned. Both countries are marking 70 years of their alliance, so naturally, Kim Jong-un is angry. He usually escalates when there is a joint drill. But this time, he's got more reasons. South Korea also launched its first commercial-grade satellite last week. The hope is to build and deploy a spy satellite by late 2023. This would give South Korea an edge. So maybe Kim Jong-un is thinking ahead. Maybe he wants to keep the military status quo. But to do that, he will also need outside help. Kim's biggest ally is China. They have refused to comment on the planned launch. Instead, they called for meaningful dialogue. Where does that leave the Korean peninsula? More volatile than before. Kim Jong-un has carried out 100 missile tests since 2022. In the past, such tests indicated a willingness to talk. It was Kim's way of saying, come to the table. But this time, the dynamics are different. The Ukraine war will be playing on his mind. In the 1990s, Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons, and look what happened to them. So getting Kim to give up his nukes will be harder than ever. Plus, how interested is the US? Biden has taken a harsher stance than Donald Trump. So no summits and love letters. In fact, last month he sent a stern warning. Biden said a nuclear attack by North Korea would end the Kim dynasty. He also signed a new security declaration with Seoul. So the dynamics in Korea have changed. South Korea is more assertive now. It has launched a satellite. It is talking about becoming the world's #1 arms manufacturer. All this would have unsettled Kim Jong-un. Hence, the satellite launch. Now, there's something else that's making headlines in Japan. Turns out Tokyo has its own Partygate scandal. It involves Prime Minister Fumio Kishida's son, Shotaro. He was serving as one of the Prime Minister's advisors. But now, Kishida has succumbed to public pressure and sacked his son. Why? Well, Kishida's heir apparent held a private party last December. This was at the PM's official residence. And new photos from the party have emerged. Shotaro Kishida and his guests are seen being inappropriate. Not in the way you'd expect, though. They were seen posing at a symbolically important place. Yes, that's it. Not exactly what most of us would consider a scandal. But in Japan, it caused an outrage. And it led to the Prime Minister having to fire his political heir. Here's more. This is Shotaro Kishida, eldest son of Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, and his executive policy secretary. But that's set to end this Thursday. Kishida Jr. has got the sack. He's being forced to step down. No, it's not because of the obvious nepotism, but because of a party. Shotaro is facing the music for partying last December at the Prime Minister's official residence. The scandal is about a Bonenkai, or Forget the Year party on 30th December. A lot of relatives were invited, and pictures from the gathering have been made public. Shotaro and his relatives were photographed posing on the red carpeted stairs at the PM's residence, with Kishida Jr. standing at the center. A place of honor reserved for the Prime Minister. It has drawn a stream of criticism. Now, this may not seem like much to a lot of people around the world. However, it's a big deal in Japan. The stairs at the PM residence hold a symbolic value. You see, the Prime Minister's residence is a 100-year-old building. It used to serve as the PM's office till 2005. That's when a new office was built and the old building was turned into the PM's living quarters. So the building and the iconic stairs are looked upon with deep respect. Shotaro Kishida posing there is seen as extremely disrespectful. Then there were other pictures. The partygoers were also seen standing at a podium, as if holding a news conference. All of this has outraged the Japanese people. And their ire was directed at Fumio Kishida. The Prime Minister is facing flack for his son's actions. His popularity is tanking once again. Kishida has been facing heat continuously during his tenure. A lot of it came after the assassination of former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. The assassin killed Abe over his links to Japan's controversial Unification Church. It brought scrutiny to the ruling party's links with the organization. Those ties caused Kishida's popularity to tank, but he was overcoming that. In fact, Kishida saw a boost in ratings recently. This was after the recent G7 summit in Hiroshima. Kishida was finally being seen as a true statesman. But then, this Bonenkai party picture debacle happened. Kishida has no choice but to oust his son from his position. So far, he had kept Shotaro in office despite the optics. He began working for his father in 2020. After all, it's common in Japan to groom one's heir on the job. It's especially common in Japanese politics. You have numerous examples of dynastic politics in the country, like former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. He was the grandson of former Prime Minister Nobusuke Kishi, so the nepotism wasn't too unusual. But Shotaro keeps courting controversy. From using embassy cars for private sightseeing trips to shopping for luxury souvenirs for cabinet members. The Japanese Prime Minister tried to sweep it all under the carpet. But the party photographs were too much for Kishida to ignore. Shotaro is now getting the boot for his inappropriate behavior. Kishida has now said, and I quote, his behavior at a public space was inappropriate as someone who is in an official position as political aide. I've decided to replace him for accountability. It's a blow for the Japanese Prime Minister, but it could be a victory in the fight against nepotism in politics. Uganda has passed a draconian law, one of the harshest anti-LGBTQ laws in the world. If you're gay in the African nation, you could face 20 years in prison, or even worse, death penalty. There has been a huge outcry since the law was signed. The West calls it a violation of human rights, threatening to cut off billions of dollars of aid to Uganda. But inside the country, the legislation has huge support. Our next report takes a look at this new draconian law and the state of LGBTQ rights in Africa, a continent where homosexuality is banned in nearly 30 nations.
The bill passed and the title settled.
Ugandan lawmakers are celebrating the passage of a new bill, the Anti-Homosexuality Bill 2023. One that has received huge support in the African nation. Many are calling it one of the harshest anti-LGBTQ laws in the world. A draconian measure that targets the country's queer community. Same-sex relations were already illegal in Uganda. But this new law goes much further. It includes capital punishment for serial offenders, as well as for those transmitting a terminal illness through gay sex. Not just that, there's even a 20-year sentence for promotion of homosexuality. President Museveni has himself called homosexuality a deviation from normal, urging lawmakers to resist any imperialist pressure. He did ask lawmakers to tone down parts of the law, but ultimately ended up approving the draconian measure. For LGBTQ activists in Uganda, this is a final nail in the coffin. They don't know where to go or what to do.
I think that's the last nail in the coffin. Because you see, we've been targeted well long before, even when those bills have not been initiated. But now, it's like a household talk, and once since it has been signed, then that means people are going to be jailed, other people are going to be murdered.
The West has strongly criticized this new law, calling it a violation of human rights. US President Biden has warned Uganda of severe implications, while the European Union has called it deplorable. Uganda could risk losing billions of dollars in aid too. But in the country, the bill has strong support. It could even have ripples across the African continent.
We see that the more states are sponsoring these bills, these hateful legislations, the more the LGBT communities is impacted, and also that affects as well, how other politicians and other countries are following suit. So yeah, this bill, as is signed now into law by President Museveni, is having real consequences on the LGBTQ individuals in Uganda, but also across the region.
Homosexuality is banned in at least 30 nations in Africa. The maximum penalty in some nations is death, including the likes of Mauritania, Somalia, and Nigeria. In others, jail terms and life imprisonment is the maximum penalty. South Africa is the only African country where gay marriage is legal. However, it still has high rates of homophobic crime. Many believe Uganda's law is just the start. It will push African nations to pursue harsher anti-LGBTQ laws. Our last story tonight is about a Russian spy, or at least one suspected to be a spy. Russian spies have been feared for decades now. Books have been written and movies made about them. The KGB, which is Russia's intelligence agency, became a global sensation during the Cold War. It ran a sophisticated network of spies across nations. People began admiring the agency and its spies simply because it gave the best intel agencies of the world a run for their money. And while the Cold War is far behind us, the fear of Russian spies lingers on, which is why the appearance of a whale off the coast of Sweden has sparked fears within NATO. Their latest fear is this: has Russia unleashed whale spies on its enemies? That's right, this alleged spy isn't human. It's a friendly, playful, innocent mammal that lurks in the waters. But Russia's rivals believe there's something fishy about the whale. Our next report tells you why.
This is a beluga whale, a calm, playful and innocent creature. It's called Voldemir. Why the peculiar name, you ask? Well, it's a pun, a satirical take on the whale's job, which is to spy on Russia's enemies. The Norwegians nicknamed the whale Voldemir to highlight the mammal's association with Russia and its president Vladimir Putin. The Russian spy whale first made an appearance in 2019. It was believed to have been an agent of the Russian Navy, lurking in the waters of the region to collect information against NATO countries. Now, Voldemir has made a comeback. On Sunday, the whale appeared here, off Sweden's southwestern coast. The whale has been speedily traveling for the past couple of months. Experts believe hormones are driving the whale. Remember, this is a 13 to 14-year-old whale whose hormones are peaking. Experts say Voldemir seems to be on the lookout for a partner to mate with. Sebastian Strand, a marine biologist with the One Whale organization, said this: "It could be hormones driving him to find a mate, or it could be loneliness, as belugas are a very social species. It could be that he's searching for other beluga whales." But now let's answer the all-important question: why is this whale considered a Russian spy? It's because when Voldemir was first discovered in 2019 off the coast in Norway, it was wearing a harness that had camera mounts, essentially making it capable of filming underwater. And do you know what was written on the harness? Equipment St. Petersburg. And that was enough evidence for European countries to believe that the whale was up to no good. For context, St. Petersburg is an important city in Russia. So the poor whale became a victim of the classic guilty by association mindset. But the fears of NATO aren't all too exaggerated either. You see, researchers say the whale has clearly been trained. It approaches boats, raises its head above water, and finally opens its mouth, expecting treats for amusing the onlookers. Norway is particularly concerned. It has issued an advisory. It has asked its citizens to steer clear of the whale and not interact with it. Then there's also Russia's supposed history of training whales to be spies. That's what really bothers Moscow's rivals. Russia has been training marine mammals since the Cold War. But Russia isn't alone. In 2014, Ukraine accused Russia of stealing its military dolphins. Ukraine has been training and deploying dolphins for military operations for years now. It even had a center for training the mammals to perform daring operations. But when it comes to the beluga whales, Russia seems to have a soft spot. Why? Because these whales can perform a variety of jobs, like protecting naval bases, detecting mines and torpedoes, and even assisting naval divers. And there's a history of Russia using these mammals for military purposes, which is why Europe is convinced that Vladimir is a Russian spy, one that needs to be avoided at all costs.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Starting with the United States, a shooting happened at a beach in Florida. 9 people, including children, have been injured. In Turkey, an event celebrating Erdogan's return to power went horribly wrong. Fireworks exploded in the hands of a person. In Italy, 3 new skeletons have been found in Pompeii. They are victims of a catastrophic volcanic eruption that happened about 2,000 years ago. And finally, what makes May 30th significant? Taking you back in history, on this day, 1942, The British Royal Air Force dispatched more than 1,000 bombers against Germany. This was codenamed Operation Millennium. Germany's fourth largest city, Cologne, was heavily damaged in this attack. It was this operation that had set the tone for RAF's future operations during the Second World War. We leave you with that. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
We have a long list of German cities in which the vital industries of the German war machine are established. All these it will be our stern duty to deal with, as we have already dealt with Lübeck, with Rostock, and half a dozen important bases. The civil population of Germany.
More views of Cologne show the complete devastation wrought in this most important industrial center. Wonderfully preserved is the great cathedral. Although windows have been shattered, the ancient fabric has been comparatively lightly touched by the destruction.
Email exchanges from inside the BBC, they talk about the risk of violating Indian laws. It's easier to rake up the freedom of speech debate, but does it give anyone a free pass to knowingly violate the law? America supports India because it needs India's support in return. And India is working with the US because it suits India's interests. This is how geopolitics works. Last night, he diffused a crisis with his defense minister. But today, Netanyahu was confronted with a new problem. His cabinet seems to have rebelled against him. The UK is looking at the Indian subcontinent to fill its coffers. That India seems to be negotiating from a position of power, like a partner and not a former colony.
Becoming a UK PM.
Well, it's not like that we are going to get the Kohinoor back. But at least India is on its way to the top. Huh?
But Gautam sir, there's actually not much to celebrate.
Why not? An Indian is ruling the UK.
Indian leaders in third countries often tend to overcompensate for their minority handicap.
Key.
For example, Sunak's Home Secretary of Indian origin, Suella Braverman, disapproved of India-UK free trade because it would encourage people immigrating to the UK, and the majority of whom were Indians. Structurally, India and UK have passed baggage, but still hasn't been resolved. And that is why,
ladies and gentlemen, India needs to significantly temper its expectations from Rishi Sunak. Presenting Vantage with me, Palki Sharma, a first-of-its-kind global show with an Indian perspective.
Mismanaged vaccination drive, broken healthcare systems, citizens taking matters into their own hands. India's failure in managing the COVID-19 crisis is staggering.
Want stories but without the West spin on it? Presenting Vantage with me, Palki Sharma, a first-of-its-kind global show with an Indian perspective.